Very good. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in our webinar today. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to mute your mics and open your cameras. We would like to see you and greet you. And yeah, we are going to start soon. So, as you know, I'm Imad Kanoni. I'm the chief of Midsun IKM. We are international business unit of Midsun Group. Since 2015, I have been running this company here. We distribute animal protective covers, mainly to avoid birds to get electrocuted. Please mute your mic if you don't mind, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, as I said, since 2015, I have been distributing these silicone covers that we produce. And actually, the story of selling silicone covers come from a while ago, in around 2005. I also have been looking for a solution for wildlife protection in Spain. And today, we focus on animal protection. And this is why we have invited today two experts to discuss bird mortality on electrical network. And we will also be discussing how to prevent it and how to collect data that's help NGOs and electrical companies to avoid future incidents. Please welcome Mr. Liam Innis and Mr. Mc Grady. Liam is the manager of energy ecosystem at Renewables Grid Initiative, and he will tell us about the Bird Portal initiative, which is a great idea, actually, that was born in Germany to help common people like me, like you, to inform whenever we see an deceased bird near to a pole. So the electrical company can take action and also works towards improving data collection and standardization and visualization and usage of said data. Honestly, this is a great initiative. It's because a lot of people, especially those people who live in these rural areas, they found this kind of issues and they lack the knowledge where to report this incident. So Liam, this is a great initiative. I applaud you from here. Also, we have Dr. Mc Grady. He is the Principal Ecologist and International Avian Research. He will be discussing his experience tracking birds to assess electrocution risks. So we connected recently, me and Mr. and Mike recently, because we have a lot in common. We both live in Austria. We are working with bird protection in different way in Oman, and we are both married with Austrian women. So we have a lot of common, Mike and I. He's an expert with the Egyptian Vulture, and I am sure you will learn a lot from him today, I'm sure. So Liam will start his presentation first, and then it will be Mike's turn. And I hope you guys enjoy what they have to share with us and to take chance to learn. And yeah, feel free to send your questions via chat. Jacqueline, my colleague, she is with us. She will collect the question and she will ask the question at the end of each presentation. Thank you very much. Welcome, Liam. Welcome, Mike. And the floor is yours. Liam, sorry, you start.
Yeah, very gladly. I have my presentation. If you could make me a co-host, I'll be able to share it. And,
you can share now, yeah.
Okay, fabulous. So, okay, can you see my screen in full screen mode?
Yeah, perfect.
Wonderful. So first of all, yeah, I'm Liam Innis. I work for the Renewables Grid Initiative, which is a not-for-profit based in Berlin. I'll introduce my organization in a second, but I'm going to speak to you today about the state of play when it comes to protecting birds around the electricity grid. I'll focus a lot on the importance of data for this struggle, and also then barriers and priorities for action moving forward. I will talk about this Bird Portal initiative, which is one of my favorite projects, I've got to say, but also looking at some of the other work that we've done to try and shine a light on what can really be done to bring forward, better protection for birds around the grid. So first, I'll start with an introduction to the topic, then move to a presentation of who we are and what we do. Then I'll present to you a report we did back in 2019 to kind of lay the land, the situation on data and data sharing, particularly between grid operators. I'll present 2 best practices and then wrap up with some key takeaways, and I'll try and be done in around 15 minutes. If you notice that I'm going too fast, just to slow me down.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, fabulous. So just to kind of bring the topic in from a very basic area, in general, in the same way that every infrastructure has impact on nature, the grid necessarily brings issues of displacement in terms of loss of breeding and resting sites for birds, habitat loss, and also the grid corridors can dissect habitats. This is a problem for birds. It's also a problem for many other species in terms of kind of this fragmentation that we see in certain ecosystems. Specifically, though, for the problem we're talking about today, we see a big problem with many species of electrocution, and this is mainly around the medium, the lower voltage levels. When birds come into contact with unsecured components, or if pylons are just badly designed, that when a bird perches on the pylon, they connect with 2 points and become electrocuted. This is a big problem for many raptors, storks, owls, and indeed in some parts of the world, this threatens species viabilities completely. There'll be some more examples of that later. Aside from electrocution, we also see the main problem of collision, and this happens more often than not on the high and the extra high voltage levels of the grid with the ground wires that go atop of the current carrying wires. Now, these are much thinner and they're not bundled in the same way that the other wires are, so that often birds, and this is normally larger birds with lower maneuverability, so like a swan, a crane, something like this, will fly, see the grid, see the lines, but swerve to avoid the current carrying lines, only to hit the earth wire above and die. Now, what's the scale that we're talking about? There's been many estimates on this, but one study from NABU a few years back estimated that this is between 1.5 and 2.8 million collision victims in Germany alone, only on the extra high voltage level. So that's only a specific part of the problem, but really gives some kind of scary numbers there. So what are the consequences here in terms of for people, for nature, for grid operators? Well, clearly this damages the viability of birds. This biodiversity here is in danger. We've already seen that some species are threatened, but also many individuals are dying. Otherwise, often when electrocution happens, this leads to an outage. So this has financial losses for the grid operator who is responsible for system security. Otherwise, in terms of acceptance and reputation, when civil society knows that a grid operator is responsible for these deaths and is not acting on it, this damages their reputation, and this then reduces the public acceptance of the infrastructure which is necessary for the energy transition. Finally, this can also link to the permits. Of course, all infrastructure needs to go through environmental screening, and often if damage is noted for birds, then this can really damage the chance that a project will be granted. But luckily, there are ways to address this. For example, by applying bird markers to lines, by insulating lines, by new design. In the planning stage, by using data to find data on where the birds are and avoiding these areas. And also using innovative monitoring technologies, using radar, things like this. And importantly, working together with the experts from civil society or science academia. And I really think the point that I want to hammer home is that data is at the base of all of these solution strategies. We can't do any of these things if we don't have the data on where the mortalities are happening and where the birds are. Just briefly then to go back, who am I and why are we talking about this? So RGI is a collaboration of TSOs and NGOs across Europe, mainly Western Europe. We have now 25 members in 11 countries, and we try to match each country, a grid operator, to NGOs. We work on issues like system integration of renewable energies and technological innovation, communication, democratic approaches to participation in grid decisions. And what I work on there is the environmental impact of the grid. So this obviously has a lot to do with birds. It also has to do with vegetation management and kind of the multifunctionality of energy. And we also work a lot in the offshore region as well, but I work onshore. So what do we do at RGI with bird protection? How do we address this problem? So one of the key and the first things to do is to raise awareness among grid operators, civil society and policymakers. And we've done this in the past through video campaigns, brochures that we've now translated into many languages, events to engage the relevant actors. These pictures are from a conference that I organized with German partners last year. And collaborations, really international collaborations between civil society and industry. The first set of logos you can see here is the German project, the Bird Portal, which I'll describe soon. The second one, Life Safe Lines for Birds, is a new project between stakeholders in Germany, Belgium, France, and Portugal to really tackle the same thing in a very open data and technology first approach. Aside from that, I spend a lot of time looking for best practices across the world, and we try to spread these as much as we can. So we have a database, we do social media campaigns. We also have a yearly Good Practice of the Year award where bird protection initiatives often come really first. And as well, we look at the data issue in a scientific way. And so the report that I'll present to you soon is one that we did in 2019 with BTO and RSPB from the UK to look at how TSOs use data and how this can be changed and improved. So to connect to the data issue then, why do we need this? What do we need to understand? What is there? Well, first of all, we need to understand the factors influencing risk, and this must be species specific. We need to understand where these hotspots of vulnerabilities are, and this includes over continental scale. So we think about migratory pathways here. And of course, we need to understand the effectiveness of mitigation and best practice guidance. You know, these are all key tasks, and for all of them, data is vital. Why? To see where the mortalities are happening, to identify the black lines, as we refer to them, to measure the effectiveness of the mitigation measures, for example, of bird markers. There's no way to do this theoretically. It needs to be done through studies on the ground. To improve spatial planning and mitigation measures, you know, to improve planning and make sure that no new grids are planned in migration pathways. Here we talk a lot about sensitivity mapping. And all of this leads to lower costs, increased efficiency, and the list goes on, more acceptance, more environmentally friendliness of the infrastructure. So they all individual, but also very connected tasks, I think. And I think one of the key messages is that sharing data or barriers thereto hampers the development of these solutions. So this bird data report that we started then, the aim was to assess the type of data collected by TSOs across Europe, to assess the potential for wider sharing among TSOs and NGOs. And we did this through a questionnaire to 16 TSOs across Northern Europe and workshops with TSOs, NGOs, and researchers. So I'll
excuse me, Liam,
yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me for interrupting you. I just have a question. You only guys work with TSOs, or you also work with the DSOs, distribution service operator?
So RGI, it's a good question. So RGI only works with TSOs. Our members are only TSOs, but we have projects and partners with DSOs as well. You know, we recognize the importance of distribution system operators. In the bird portal in Germany, we have 3 DSOs on board. And indeed, moving forward, we always want to collaborate more with DSOs because they're just a vital part of the energy transition. The problem is when it comes to kind of having representation across Europe, there's so many DSOs. I think in Germany, there's something like 500. So, you know, to have the kind of bigger effect and to be able to function as a small NGO, we targeted the TSOs.
Sure, good.
But this report was only done for the transmission system. So the questionnaire, first of all, it looked at data collection and partnerships and found that most TSOs are required to collect data and have some kind of partnerships with NGOs. However, when it came to the range of data collected, there's real variation. Monitoring is done either systematically, opportunistically when an outage happens, or in some cases both. And the presence and whether the data is collected before or after construction also varies widely. And this is governed by kind of the authorities at local, regional, national levels. Sometimes it's you know, very, very regulated. Sometimes it's really not. So this variation was a key issue that we identified quite early on. When it comes to making use of this data that's gathered, we found that in fact, almost all of the TSOs we discussed with have used data on bird presence to modify their infrastructure. For example, here, 9 of them had used this data to choose where to put the markers. 2 of them had used this data to plan in future where they will put the markers. and 5 of them will use this to avoid high-risk areas. So data is key for their decisions, but when it comes to sharing data, the picture is a lot more skewed. In fact, we found that over half of TSOs don't share data at all. And this is kind of linked to an unclarity of where to store it, who to share it with. In fact, if you look at this table here, you see really varying answers. 7 said that there's no central database, a database could help. 5, it's unclear who to share with. 4, they don't know which data to share. But then there's also things like a commercial interest in keeping data private to themselves, a confidential interest of not sharing, and generally, many, many people said that they just lack the resources to give this the attention that it deserves. Just briefly, what kind of data are they actually interested in? Well, it's varied, but we found that the most important data is study data. Published studies, of course, is very high up on the list, and also literature review, which gives kind of a meta-analysis of all of the studies out there, would be very successful, especially when it comes to the effectiveness of mitigation measures. In fact, this is something that I think is a really big problem to getting clarity on the issue of bird mortality, is that the studies are out there are often in different languages. They are either older, newer, they use different scientific techniques to gather. And so you speak to different TSOs in our group, and we notice they say different things. They have different ideas of which bird markers are the most effective. So there's really lacking this kind of overview of what is the most effective way to work. Quickly to sum up what the key findings are then. There's variation in the amount and frequency of data collection, so there's no standardized protocols on what, when, and how, which vitally prevents comparability and a bigger picture. TSOs want data, and they need it for their decisions. And there is a strong desire for some kind of repository, some kind of database, if it's simple, cost-effective, and has explicit aims. As I said, this lack of database is a key barrier, but there's really currently no clarity on how to use this. But something to underline is that there's a lack of resources. So any database would need to be kind of an easy fix, not more work for everyone.
Yeah.
Confidentiality is another key barrier. And so there's really a key thing there is to build up this trusted network, to share research, to share in an open data way all of the new research. And as well on confidentiality, people are generally concerned about the public backlash, about going public with these things. They're scared of what the public would say. So to present then a couple of best practices, which I feel like epitomize a better approach to this, our collaborative bird portal is based in Germany, where we work together with NABU, the BirdLife Germany, 4 TSOs and 3 DSOs. And this project, you can see here on this map downstairs, it's a project which allows people who find a dead bird underneath a power line to report this through the NABU portal. This information then goes to the NABU colleague, my colleague Katarina, who I believe is in the audience. This is then ranked and kind of analyzed and then shared with the grid operators for discussion. And this kind of informs the way that they work. Where they would put mitigation measures, maybe something like this. It seeks to build up a better impression. It's a citizen science approach, as I said. This is volunteers that collect this data, people from the public, but still the amount of records that we collect is quite low. So we average around 50 records per year. More than just that, though, more than the portal, the project serves as a intra-grid operator exchange on things that actually we found that generally grid operators don't seem to talk about. This is, for example, important on planning issues, on bird flight diverters. We found again and again that people actually have this kind of blinkered silo look and often just don't reach out to their peers, to their partners to ask their opinions. And so with this project, we really just seek to create this room for discussion. And indeed, we have a working group now looking on the effectiveness of bird flight diverters and engaging developers of bird flight diverters to try and come up with something better and more effective. Of course, then awareness raising on the issue is another thing that we work on. And as I said, we created this lovely brochure, which has since been translated into 7 languages. Here you see Italian, Greek, Portuguese and French and Polish. And we're always looking to distribute this. So if you're interested, do let me know. And we're also well up for translating it into new languages. So happy to discuss that further. Just briefly, as I said, we call people together to try and really bring kind of new life into this topic. And so last year in September, we organized a national conference in Germany to really address this head on. We also had an excursion to a nature protection area in Germany where the grid operator there, Westnetz, has taken a lot of initiative on protecting the birds in the area. And the aim of this really was to discuss how we can get from where we are to where we want to be, to a stage where no birds are dying on the grid. Following this, we released a report, which is, the report's only available in German, but the summary is available in English too. And I'll share the link as well. But I think one thing that's important is that when we were talking to all of the people at the conference, one of the issues that came back again and again was issues of data. I mean, this is in German, but you can kind of see data basis and availability, standardization and the legal framework, and hotspots and risk analyses. You know, when we came to summarizing these impulses for action, which people really saw as priorities for policy moving forward, 4 of them directly linked to data, how data should be collected, stored, disseminated, shared. It's a real present issue, which actually puts the brakes on more innovative action on bird protection. To my second case study, I'd like to present Belgium. I can try and do this one quickly, but it's a really powerful thing that happened over there. Basically, the Belgian grid operator, Ilia, found that around some of their lines, there was real problems with electrocutions. In fact, here you see these black-headed gulls on the floor. And indeed, one member of the public was contacting Ilia again and again, reporting these deaths. And in the period of 1 month, I think it was in 2014, she found 65 black-headed gulls underneath one part of the grid. This then led to kind of very bad press. You know, it was getting into the newspapers, which is bad news for a grid operator, of course. So what did they do? They thought to really systematically approach this project, and they got into touch with 2 NGOs. Here you see the logos, Natuurpunt and Natagora, to work together and try and address this. They started with extensive monitoring from the NGOs and the volunteers to find out where the birds are dying. Then they also used data that these NGOs had available to them on bird presence, bird roosting sites, bird feeding sites, migration pathways through Belgium. And importantly, to go back to the monitoring done on bird mortality, you'll see that all of the bird mortality, all of the victims that were found were put into this public database, which is available to everyone. What they did then with all of this data was to create a national risk map for all of Belgium, where they piled up all of this data on top of each other and then added a grid map. And what they found was, and here you can see, only 3.16% of the lines were black lines, were important, really important lines where they shouldn't build here, or if they do, they need to really address mitigation. So this is actually lower than I think they were expecting it to be. So much so that this approach and this work now serves as the basis of Ilia's planning and retrofitting strategy. So what did they learn from this, and what was the experience? They found that since working together with the NGOs, since exchanging data in this way, they have less outages, lower costs, and higher efficiency because they're able to choose exactly where they should put these markers for them to be effective. This gives them far better planning. They know that if there's a migration pathway, they just don't build a line there because it's going to cause them problems. Much more positive PR. In fact, the public has really kind of jumped on this. I think it's something like they had 6 features on the 7 o'clock news in Belgium, which is a big deal. There was 75 articles in the online news. So really nice, positive PR. Here you can see a colleague of them speaking on the news. And it's been integrated into their strategy in the long term as well. Indeed, Ilia now aims to equip bird deterrent devices on 200 kilometers of their grid by 2030. What were the learnings from this? The benefits, yes, at the start, it's expensive and it's kind of a big exercise, but they really pay off long and short term. Trust is key. I think at the start, there was kind of a bit of a mistrust, people accusing Ilya of inaction, Ilya wanting to get away from this bad press, but really when they trust each other, they could build on this. And indeed, they found that the results were a lot less dramatic than expected. And I think the issue of language here is also important, I think for me, certainly the biggest problem is biodiversity loss, but for a grid operator, maybe their language is more in terms of system security, in terms of efficiency, in terms of money. They're a business after all. And I think often we need to learn to speak the same language on these issues. And another example, which I don't have time to go in for, but it is also an excellent work in Belgium on their biodiversity strategy, managing biodiversity and vegetation under the lines, also in collaboration with civil society, exchanging data, working together with local partnerships. And again, in that case, prices went down, efficiency goes up, the PR is much more positive. So to summarize, and I'm really on the last two slides now, how can we build on this and move forward? Well, key to it all is awareness and communication. First of all, sharing studies and evidence in a simple database was recommended in the study and in all of the work that we do. Interdisciplinary exchanges between civil society and industry are vital and really to kind of get this internal buy-in. In-house ecologists and biologists are the best contact partners when discussing these things. So sometimes grid operators employ these, but otherwise experts need to be involved. On the lack of resources, grid operators sometimes say that they can't afford to like really roll out these bird markers, but also it's important to think about the costs of inaction in these cases. Okay, it might cost you 10,000 to retrofit this line, but how much is it going to cost you if a bird is electrocuted and the system falls out? It might be in the millions,
Yeah.
Collaboration between NGOs and TSOs is vital, really, and also because NGOs have the knowledge and data, and often also the ability to monitor more efficiently, galvanizing volunteers in their network. Here I say again, volunteers for data collection. It's not that TSOs should train a team to go out every day and run the lines, but in the same way that we within the bird portal rely on opportunistic finds by the public, this is a key way of collecting data. And as well, I think something that we should also have in mind, all of us, is that we need to advocate for more resources for meaningful engagement for this issue. Finally, standardization and centralization. We saw that when it comes to data collection, the lack of uniformity in standards really prevents a kind of uniform approach on this. Grid operators ask for guidance in terms of field methods and data collection, and that rolls into the idea of a centralized database being particularly useful. Noting there, though, that this should be as easy as possible. It shouldn't cause extra work. And first of all, some kind of data scoping study should be done to see exactly how a database should look. Sensitivity mapping exercises are just always sensible to get all the data together. So this is something that I can't support enough. And again, the standards can be national, regional, EU-wide when it comes to retrofitting. There needs to be some kind of guideline to, in some cases, force action where it might be reluctant. Finally, the issue of confidentiality. Trust is at the base of it all. Meta information can really help to build up this trusted network. If somehow there's some kind of internal way of sharing all of these reports, it would build knowledge, but also build trust. And finally, involving civil society and early stage in planning can reconcile the needs of bird protection with what is technically possible. And I think that's, again, something that within the Bird Portal project, we're really trying to do. We bring together the interests of nature protection with grid operation to see what's possible and to see where there's some easy wins in terms of, saving birds' lives and making this whole thing more efficient, I think.
Yeah.
That's me, and I would love to be in touch afterwards. I'm very happy to hear your questions.
Well, Liam, thank you very much. That was a very, very lovely presentation. Thank you. A lot of information to absorb. A lot of work you guys have done, and congratulate you for that. I have some questions. So, in your opinion, what would you assess as a result of Bird Portal so far right now?
I think one of the main results is that all of the grid operators involved present themselves transparently and ready to approach this issue head on and in collaboration with NABU. You know, it's not something that people bury their head in the sands. It's actually shows the willingness to engage this topic. And even if the data that we gather is not scientifically valid, it is an attempt to really approach this issue head on. Like I said, we have working groups looking at more effective bird markers and things like that. So I think in the future soon, we're going to have more results. But for now, it's already been a good start.
Just out of curiosity, how many bird notifications do you receive per month, if you have it's more or less an idea?
You mean the reports from the public coming in?
Yeah.
So it's 50 per year is the average. So I guess that's around 5 per month. Yeah, it's like I said, it's little, but we're gonna try and spread the word more within Germany.
Yeah, that link with my other questions. Do you know if there are other initiatives like you or some other countries that copies your initiative, or you're working to implement it in other countries? Because Europe is very small, but in terms of language barrier, it's very big. You know, how you have a Greek guy talking to a Spanish guy, you know, it's just like you need English, but sometimes English is not the comfortable language to communicate. So
yeah,
this is true. Like this?
So this is something that we are definitely interested in developing. We're talking to colleagues from a few different countries to try and see if we can replicate this project. I know that there are some platforms out there that can be used. There's a few different websites. There's also some grid operators, some colleagues who have internal databases, you know, where the technicians are out in the field, they can import it on their smartphone and this goes into a database. But I think we really need to be looking towards a more centralized approach to this to build a more scientific, sound understanding of the issue. So the bird portal is a good example. And I think moving forward, we can think even bigger.
That would be very nice, to be honest. That would be very nice because it's great initiative, and anything we could do to preserve this habitat when we all live and share and when we benefit is very welcome. Yeah. And from my side, thank you very much, Liam. Thank you. Thank you, you and all the team behind you and your colleagues. And also I have to say something when you were talking, because I worked myself in an electrical utility a while ago, and you are absolutely right. There is data within the electrical utilities, because you have, every time you have an outage, you have to report what are the reasons. And when you don't find anything, normally it's bird or animal. So you have to report the data. The problem is how you take this data and give it to someone like you, other initiatives, in a confident way. Me as engineer, I can call you and say, hey, Liam, we had an outage yesterday in this line, and you can go there and check it. But maybe I will be breaching some company policy by notifying you if I'm not going through the channel. So if you make this work easy for me to communicate, it will be very beneficial for everyone. Yeah. And believe me, electrical utilities are the #1 who are interested, not on the sake of preserving birds. Let's not be cynical here, but in the sake of preserving their own grid. So yeah, it's good initiative.
Thank you very much. Yeah, open to more questions later, but I think you really you made some good points. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. We have some discussion in the chat. Someone is asking for the report you shared before and the brochure, and I think one of your colleagues is already addressing that. So thank you for that. Anyone you want to open the mic and have ask Liam any questions? If not, we're gonna go to the next presentation. Gentlemen, someone has the mic open, and it's Richard King, Mr. King. Okay, so let's go to our next presentation. Mr. Mike, or Dr. Mike, please, if you don't mind to unmute yourself, you are muted. Mike, you are muted now.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are unmuted now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Yeah, very interesting talk that Liam gave us. I'm going to come at this from a slightly different focus, maybe. And first of all, I'm going to transport you a little bit. We've been talking very much a kind of a European situation, but this issue is actually global. And what I'll be talking about mostly is an initiative we started in Oman. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizations that have helped me in the field, the Muscat Electricity Distribution Company, the Environmental Authority of Oman, and the NGO, the environmental NGO there, the Environment Society of Oman. First of all, Oman is very, as I said, very different from European countries. Oman is a big country, 1,200 kilometers north to south, and but relatively undeveloped. So since in 1970, they had less than 100 kilometers of tarmac road. So they've gone from a very undeveloped country to a highly developed country and expanding. So the population's expanding, electrification of the environment of the villages and towns is going at breakneck speed. So we've had a very, very rapid development of all aspects of life in Oman. And people's living standards have gone up, and they expect more from their governments and things like that. And the government is a monarchy, so it's not democratically run. It doesn't have very many NGOs keeping an eye on what the government is doing. And it's also a highly diverse country, both in terms of landscape and their wildlife. From a bird standpoint, we don't know very much about what's there, but almost everywhere we look, there are important populations of birds. I started this project to look at Egyptian vultures. Egyptian vultures are a globally endangered species, but the landfill at Muscat, you can go there, and on a good winter day, you can see 400 or 500 Egyptian vultures. I mean, it's the biggest aggregation of Egyptian vultures that I know of in the world. And when I was starting this, I said, oh, well, having so many vultures around, they must be coming from someplace else. They must be migratory. So we fitted a bunch of these with transmitters. We fitted to 17 of them. And lo and behold, instead of having them leave on migration, they all stayed around. And what we have found now is that Oman is actually a stronghold for their resident population. The Egyptian vultures stay there year round, and it's a highly dense population of breeding Egyptian vultures. At the same time, there are other large soaring birds that are endangered and use Oman. Lappet-faced vultures, large vultures they're also globally endangered, are resident, and as we've got a parallel study there, and we're finding more and more lappet-faced vultures. Also, there are migratory birds. So again, globally endangered steppe eagles migrate in big numbers into Oman every winter, and they feed there, spend the winter there, but are also exposed to electrocution risk. As Liam talked about, we have this problem, and there's kind of two sides to it. There's the medium voltage electrocution problem, but also the high voltage transmission lines that are on these large pylons that could be a collision issue. For the electrocution problem, to a great extent, it's a matter of geometry. So these are a lot of the birds that are being affected are large birds, and they're just able to span the distance between a live component and either a grounded or a component in a different phase. So big birds are more susceptible, but that's not always the case. Some configurations are dangerous to birds because their birds tend to can nest on them. So smaller birds can nest on transformers and things like that and cause electrocution of the birds, but also outages that are expensive and problematic for virtually everybody. The goal of our study, we actually started this study trying to understand the ecology of the birds, and didn't have in mind particularly electrocution, but we've been collecting data to understand the general ecology of these birds, and we can use those data and apply it to issues of electrocution. So what we really wanted to do is identify areas of bird electrocution risk, both for conservation, but also for these service benefits, benefits to the consumer, benefits to the company, benefits to the government. There's two things that we can do. If you recall, remember that Oman is a developing country. Of course, there's an existing network of power lines that might benefit from being retrofitted with insulation to reduce electrocution risk. But there's also areas for future when they build new infrastructure. Where do they want to place it? Are there ways of routing different lines so that there's less of a risk to birds? Identifying the infrastructure for the future, well, of course, we can use safer designs and safer locations, but it should be kept in mind that often, if we can plan forward, the cost is greatly reduced. So if you just use a better design from the beginning, the cost to the government or the company that's putting in the infrastructure is actually more or less the same. And as Liam said, I mean, electrocution is basically bad for everybody. First of all, it's bad for the consumers. They lose their service. They can't watch their television or things that are more important, actually. It's bad for electricity companies. These costs of sending out teams to repair problems is high. And this customer relations, and are you being a good service provider? And are your customers in public relations are they satisfied? It's bad for business. These interrupted production can increase costs of any kind of business, particularly manufacturing or things like that. In the case of Oman, it's bad for the economy. In Oman, government is a large shareholder in the oil company in Oman, and the oil accounts for about 68% of the country's income. So an outage caused by a bird in an oil field is a big deal. It affects everybody. It affects the bottom line of the government on an annual basis. In another way, it affects governments because governments provide services. So like public safety, hospitals, traffic control, everything relies on power. The loss of power affects the public. And of course, and the way I approached it, at least my focus initially, is the bad for wild. You have a higher mortality of sometimes endangered species. And it's losing one or two birds doesn't sound like a lot, but it's endangered species, and these are say adult birds that are very important for population stability, then the effect on the population is much greater. And what we found in Oman, like I said, I didn't think this was something I would concentrate at the beginning, but what we're seeing is and finding is birds being killed. On the left are some steppe eagles that have been killed in southern Oman, and on the right is a lappet-faced vulture, and you can see the singe marks on its wing feathers from being electrocuted. These are both globally endangered species. So what we did was started by tagging these birds, fitting them with GPS transmitters. Typically, we do this with larger birds. Partially, that's because larger birds are easier to track. They can carry a transmitter. So the rule of thumb is that you want between 3 and 5% of the body weight, and these transmitters are, the smallest transmitters are very small, but they don't give you much data. These ones we're putting on Egyptian vultures weigh about 25 grams. The new technology, as technology has increased, we're now dealing with GPS accuracy. There's high data volume. So in the solar the sunny parts of Oman with the solar powered transmission, we can gather data at a rate of 1 location per second. So you can imagine the amount of data we can collect if we need to. Of course, gathering 1 data point per second gives you a mountain of data that you then have to filter through at the end. These tags now last a long time. We have tags now could last theoretically for 10 years or so. So you're able to gather data over a long period of time with one individual. So from a study standpoint, it makes things a lot easier. Everything's getting smaller. So like I said, right now for Egyptian vultures, they're about 20 grams, but we're getting now GPS technology that goes down to about 5 grams. So that's, I mean, you can be tracking quite small birds with the new technology. And it's also getting cheaper, just like our computers are getting faster, more powerful, and less expensive. Same thing's happening with these tracking systems. And here's just, when we track birds, we see they use the infrastructure. You can see this is the shadow of a pylon, and you can see the locations of this Egyptian vulture. They would go and visit this and sit in the pylon and essentially use the pylon on a daily basis. And we found some of our tracked birds were being killed. So this is again an Egyptian vulture we tracked, and all of a sudden it stopped working. We then went down, and you can see the poles on the left, last location of this bird, and we find the Egyptian vulture under a bit of infrastructure. And these seem to be particularly dangerous. These transformers with as they step down the power to from the distribution. So what we did is we had all this tracking data. Like I said, we were using it to understand how the birds moved around the country, and we wanted to apply it to, can we predict the risk of electrocution? So we took the tracking data. That's the tracking of a Egyptian vulture for about one summer, the last summer, and we overlaid that with the data from the infrastructure, the electricity infrastructure, and produced from this a risk model using not only where the infrastructure occurred, but other variables as well. So essentially we come up with a set of data of tracking, but also descriptors of the environment. How rugged is the environment? How much vegetation is on the environment? How far is it to a road? How far is it to a town? A whole range of variables to try to understand where the birds prefer to go, and then overlay the infrastructure on top of it. And the model results are, we're just starting on this, and we've essentially the Egyptian vultures, they select dry areas with little vegetation. They like rugged terrain, so they like mountains and hills and things. They like rubbish dump sites. As you in my earlier slide, you saw that it was around the dump sites in Muscat. There were lots of different. And they use both pylons and medium voltage infrastructure. Although this is one map, we have a daytime and a nighttime map, and the nighttime shows where the birds go to sleep, to roost at night, and the daytime one shows where they're active during the day. So actually, the daytime includes more and more of the high voltage line because these are used for daytime perching. So they choose roads but mostly they choose roads at high elevation, and the reason why they choose roads is sometimes they're feeding off of roadkill animals. They do avoid vegetated areas, flat areas, and villages in low zones. This is a very early iteration of this model, and like I said, we've come at it without we've come upon it rather having this as our initial goal in our research. And with that, I'll answer your questions, I hope.
Yeah. So there are some questions here, and they are still asking Liam about devices and papers, which he's addressing very well. I want to ask you a question, Mike. What are the other species that you can spot that have been electrocuted in Oman? Other major species that could be in real danger?
Well, we kind of approached this from being worried about endangered species. So I've been looking, and the Environment Agency kind of looks at these things from a species protection point of view, whereas I don't have much interaction with companies and stuff that might have a nuisance issue with birds, of things that are not particularly protected. In fact, might be a nuisance themselves. So in Oman, you have mynas, and mynas are invasive species that are really a nuisance. You have Indian house crow, also a nuisance. So nobody feels it important to report that an Indian house crow has been electrocuted.
Yeah.
And of course, making its way from a company that has an outage to the conservation organization that's keeping an eye on endangered Egyptian vultures is a long and tortuous route, which sometimes nobody ever travels.
Yeah.
So
much
like Liam was saying, we have this disconnect, and people are talking different languages, and one's a problem because of the outage particularly, and it's just a house crow. And the other is, oh my gosh, we've lost another leopard-faced vulture.
From my point of view as electrical engineer, and I have worked in distribution and transmission line many years, so I'm asking you a question about the species you are working on, Mike. The Egyptian vulture, does he get electrocuted normally in distribution lines or transmission lines? This is one. And two, if you ever spotted him in any pole or transmission tower, where normally he would be sitting or posting?
Yeah, I mean, they're mostly electrocuted on distribution lines. And again, like I said, it's a case of geometry, and the different phases are
very close.
They're close together, and it's about the size. A lot of these big birds have a wingspan of 1.8 to 2.3, 2.4 meters. So they can on a distribution line, they can touch the different components. Egyptian vultures use both. You see them near the on the distribution poles, and you see them also on the pylons. Pylons tend to be used just as perches, and they're resting during the day. And the distribution lines are also perches, but one thing we did is kind of our first step in the kind of a risk assessment was to look at the distribution lines around dump sites. We know these are scavenging, and they go to the dump sites. They're concentrated there, and then we drew just a simple circle around the dump site. Said how much of your distribution network is within 3 kilometers of the dump site, and if that simple approach to retrofitting, you're talking less than 1% of the distribution lines that might actually account for 80% of the locations of the birds. So even something simple, you don't have to get these fancy models sometimes. It's just sometimes common sense. Where do the birds occur? Near landfills. You know? Let's retrofit all those, particularly the ones right next to the landfill, and then move our way out. And then let's see how we
Good. Liam has a question or comment to make.
Yeah, if I may, thank you very much, Mike, for that really interesting presentation. It's also really inspiring, I think, to see so many efforts being given to this particular species, you know, which plays such a key role in many ecosystems for really cleaning it up. Fun fact, in German, it's a Schmutzgeier, which means like a dirty eagle, because they really get in there and they clean the ecosystem. But I wanted, just as a side note, I wondered if you could give a bit more information about how what you hope that this study will lead to in terms of collaborating with the grid operators, and what measures could then be taken on the grid to prevent electrocutions happening in the future.
Well, I think, as I said at the beginning, Oman is developing, and it's not only that the networks are developing, but also the understanding of the companies and the engineers and stuff like that. You know, just like Europe and North America, where back in the 40s we just put things up and just didn't pay much attention to it. If there was a problem, we sent somebody out to fix it. And they probably haven't developed that. There's so much in the building phase that they haven't considered this kind of running phase or maintenance phase that they need to go through. Now they can solve a lot of those future problems by thinking about it now, but in general, I don't get the feeling that they are. There's not this joined up government also sometimes, although it's a monarchy and you would think they might work together. They're not against working together. They just don't. There's no history of it. They don't see the immediate payoff of working together. So that penny has to drop in the minds of the managers. I mean, once you talk to them, these are intelligent, thinking people. They go, "Oh yeah, I'd never really thought of that. And, yeah, we should be doing that." But then getting it moving is.
Well, good luck.
Even in Europe, getting moving, it's very difficult. Imagine in abroad. So we have another question from Mr. Ajas. Can you please unmute your mic and make your question, please?
I think that Junaid, I think that's you.
Yeah.
Hello, Junaid. Okay.
Yeah. He's keep the hand raised.
Okay.
All right. So you said we are going to have another questions and wrap it up. It was really, really fantastic. So you are saying, Mike, that there is collaboration right now between the companies, somehow collaboration between the companies and activities and your organization in order to improve things.
Yeah, you have to chase people. That just doesn't come naturally. So we
of course
we came up with you know, we were tracking these birds. We found they were being electrocuted. We went to talk to the electricity company. They eventually gave us data about their network. You know, things can move slowly in these warm countries. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a life project.
Yeah. Someone just posted the question in the chat, and I'm going to answer it, is about similar initiative for railroads. And I'm going to answer and saying that railroads, they take very, very seriously bird electrocution. They take it really seriously, and they put in the effort, whatever they have. And railroad powered by electrical energy, they take it very seriously, and they protect their weakest points. It's not like electrical utilities, because at the end, if you have an outage because of birds, there are no trains. So they take it very seriously. It's part of their philosophy. However, there are still some weak points to be protected. Some better selection of the covers or the shields that they are using. But I have to say, railroads against electrical utility, DCOs and TSOs, they are way ahead of them. They take it very seriously. And I can witness from my own experience in several countries. At least here in Vienna, you can see there is very long railroad close to my house. And I don't know how many kilometers is the line, but it's totally covered with covers, bird protective covers, totally, absolutely. So there is no weak spot in the whole line, and it's very, very long line. So these guys, they take it very seriously. So gentlemen, Liam, Mike, all the attendees, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I think it was very important to keep working together and joining efforts to make this problem more visible and to bring solutions that anyone could implement. Liam, thank you so much. Great initiative. Young people like you and all the people around you, you are being more conscious about what's happening in our planet, and you are doing your best. Genuinely, I personally, and in name of my company, thank you very much for the initiative. You and all the team around you and all the people that make your job easier. Mike, thank you so much. You are a lovely person, great professional. And what are the odds to, I'm working in an American company, living in Austria. I would find an American guy working in, living in Austria, doing the same in Oman. It's amazing, Mike. Thank you so much. And you are doing a great job by saving the Egyptian vulture. Thank you so much. And guys, I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Liam. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.